this day, which is interesting in many places that we're tuning in from. We in the weather report here in the Cleveland area is, at least in my backyard, about 14 inches of snow on my table. So there's a lot going on here. We have quite a few power outages. I understand there's a power outage in San Diego, and that's one of the extremes on the far west. And I want to tell you on the far east that we have someone tuning in today from Jerusalem. So we've got a lot of time zones on this, and we're also going to be recorded because several people have communicated that because of the weather, they are not able to connect for power reasons. So we're going to make this available. Should we have a problem, we'll do it again. It could happen, but we'll take it as it comes and think positively. Before I start, I also want to mention to you that we need to put on every calendar of what I consider to be a very worthwhile event, which is going to be at 1 o'clock on December the 16th. It was just a little blurb in today's monthly bulletin from NCJW. There will be more that follows, but it is Rabbi Lisa Goldstein, from whom I borrowed some materials on spirituality at that session 2 times ago. And we have council has invited her to do a very special session on resiliency, and it's going to be on Wednesday of Hanukkah at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. More to come, but I suggest that you set aside that time. So those are the commercials and the announcements. So the topic is God. One other thing, parenthetically. Thank you so much for all the positives about the session on Israel. We're going to have Etty back. She was absolutely a star, and people said more than anything else, we want more. So we will do that. We are responsive, and also happy to hear any other requests you have, because we're looking at the spring plans now, and welcome any suggestions that you would have to guide us. Okay, back to God, back to the guy in the sky. I have a lot of topics that I have a lot of information for, and I go when I get it because I've been teaching for many, many years and a student for even many, many more years. And when I got to theology and God, I had a whole file cabinet drawer full. And so I've spent about the last 3 weeks culling and taking stuff away, not figuring out what I wanted to put in. What I'm telling you is I'm overwhelmed with the topic. And it's a big topic, and I can only direct you. And I'm not trying in any way to make you believe in any certain way. And some of you may be very, very secure in your beliefs. But I know that for many of us, we yearn to be more conversant and more comfortable with the I-God relationship, or the you-God relationship. I do want you to hear a little bit about the Jewish views on the subject, and I want to spend some time talking about theology. And one of the things about theology is that it's a topic that is not spoken about a lot in Judaism. It seldom comes up. In fact, when I was in my master's program, the rabbis and the faculty said frequently that was given pretty short shrift, even in rabbinical school, that particular topic. But so basically, God, at least in Judaism, is not a household word, and sometimes talking about God is not what you do in polite society. So today we're going to be impolite, and hopefully we're going to make this a household word. Some of you may have trouble understanding how some people don't believe in God. And some of you may have trouble understanding how people do believe in God. I hope this session will be enlightening. So the first thing that we've got to do is acknowledge the human need to grapple with the unknowable, for us to look for answers. We're not our biblical ancestors. We live in a different world. There's been an evolution of the God concept. When a people has been around for more than 3,000 years, obviously things change. The biblical God was kind of eternal and omnipresent and the creator, and he revealed himself to only a few. The rabbinic and Talmudic time God was generally more homey and nearer to the people. In medieval times, the intellect started coming in, and more rationalism and grappling with God and his relationship to the world was a big thing. One of the responses was intellectual. Another of the responses was mystical. There were many. And then there is today, where we have such a variety. Many people today believe in divine punishment and reward. Many do not. Many can't. For some, God is transient everywhere. For some, God is only on the sidelines, imminent. So basically, in summary of this complicated idea, there are three basic relationships: above and giving orders, in the midst, or now in terms of maybe a guide or a partner. Those are just summaries that are overly simplistic, and we'll get into them as we can a little bit more. Okay? We have to acknowledge that we have limited ability to deal with the concept. We only have human language, we only have human references. We also, in English, we have a gender issue in terms of grammar. By default, we're using the male pronoun. Often when I'm teaching, I will say she, but today I'm probably going to default to the male because I don't want to spend time explaining or thinking too much. It's kind of the automatic gut response. We only have the tools of our experience, and we have to, for us to comprehend, try to make corporal something that isn't. I'm sorry. I have somebody with a medical situation I was looking. That's not what that's about. Goodbye, phone. Go away. Anyway, I apologize. Um, anyway, what we need to do is work on trying to wrap our heads around something that is really beyond us, and it's clearly a challenge. So let's look at the Jewish um, core belief. There is a God who is incorporeal, meaning no body, is one, is loving, and is just. Then there are these other side concepts, and I don't mean to minimize them, but for some people they are very useful, and for many they are not. The judge, the scorekeeper, the accountant, the clock winder, the puppeteer, the king, the father. We're going to talk about those. But what I want to make clear from the start is that the Jewish God, however he is very different from the much better defined Christian God. Judaism always has a menu of ideas because we have been throughout time and throughout space very disparate. In Christianity, of course, there are varieties, but there really is a theology that is quite firm with some sway one way or the other in that. Christianity, the acceptance of God is a requirement. You hear the cliche, almost cliche, creed over deed, and Judaism deed over creed. Those are overly simplistic, but they're kind of right. So the idea of creed and belief is important. The idea of a take it or leave it. If you are a good Christian, you take this. You take the leap of faith. You don't ask questions. The other thing that's very different is in Christianity, there's very much a focus on the world to come and waiting the Messiah's return. In Jewish theology, there's a core belief that God exists, but then it comes to what does God mean? And that's the unclear part of this. It's accepted that there's something bigger than us in this world, and that is a motivator for many of our actions and many of our traditions, many of our mitzvot. But the truth is that that's not a requirement to take. In other words, nobody's going to kick you out of being Jewish or tell nobody's going to give you the God test. The bigger test in terms of Judaism and being a good Jew is your actions. So one of the things that I like to explain, and this is me speaking, and it may not be everybody's view, but please understand that I'm trying to articulate something that is difficult for me, is essentially that to be a Jew is to act like there is a God. In other words, that there is something bigger than ourselves, a greater force. Maybe it's supernatural and all powerful and all knowing. Maybe it's us doing godlike things. Maybe we our God, or at least God's instrument. Maybe that's what it means to say B'Tselem Elohim. Now we got a problem. And the problem that we have is that we're stuck in this unsophisticated image of this guy in the sky. A very popular theologian today, Rabbi Arthur Green, who's the dean of the Rabbinical School at Hebrew College now in Boston, talks about that being very, very problematic, this vertical image of a God. It gives us kind of a kid-like image that none of us believe in the literal sense, and it's problematic because if you're in your own mind, you think that's the accepted Jewish view of God, and you got to take it or leave it, chances are you're going to leave it. But I have to remind you that Judaism, first of all, that is an image that has evolved in man's attempt to understand the something that's very difficult to understand, to know the unknowable. But also I have to remind you that Judaism at its core is intellectually honest. And Judaism at its core is not literal. There are many interpretations. Judaism teaches Lo b'shamayim hi. You have to live Jewishly on the earth, not in the heavens. So those particular things have to work for your way to be the best person you can be on the earth. What that also means is asking questions is required. So if you feel guilty, stop it. Stop feeling guilty. I want to share with you, one other thing that I've said a million times for those of you who've been with me for a while, guys. And that is, but I have to remind you right now, we are Yisrael. And I know that most of you can tell me what that means, but just as a reminder, Yisrael means struggling with God. So to be a good Jew is basically to struggle with the concept and figure out what that means and figure out how you're going to be the best person and how you are going to serve God and our people and the world within that context of your struggle. If you're not a good Jew, you give up. That's the bad Jew, the one who stops struggling. So you can say possibly, and this is again, maybe I'm going to get myself into trouble, that being agnostic is kind of built into Judaism at some level. And this is certainly not for everybody. What I want to share with you right now as a summary is just some basic theologies, just kind of as a review. So let's talk about traditional Judaism, and there's a lot, and I've had to crystallize something to 3 sentences is always extremely difficult. But for sake of comparison, I hope that this is valuable to you. So the traditional belief in God is, and I'm quoting from the Rambam, from Maimonides and 13 Principles of Faith, but that's a good source. I believe with complete faith that the Creator, blessed is his name, creates and guides all creatures, and that he alone has made, makes, and will make everything. I believe with complete faith that the Creator, blessed is his name, is not physical and is not affected by physical phenomena, and that there is no comparison whatever to him. I believe with complete faith that the Creator, blessed is his name, rewards with good those who observe his commandments and punishes those who violate his commandments. That's taken from the Art Scroll Siddur. Sharing with you the Reform movement's most recent. The heart of Judaism and its chief contribution to religion is the doctrine of the one living God who rules the world through law and love. We affirm that the Jewish people is bound to God by an eternal Brit covenant, as reflected in our varied understandings of creation, revelation, and redemption. The conservative. We believe in God. Indeed, Judaism cannot be detached from belief in or beliefs about God, residing always at the very heart of our self-understanding as a people. And the last one I share with you, which is kind of excuse me, there are two more I shared with you. The a movement that is very interesting, that is sometimes on people's minds and some people are very unfamiliar with it, which is the Reconstructionist Judaism founded by Rabbi Mordecai Kaplan. And this is in a quick Q&A format. I took it. Do Reconstructionist Jews believe in God? And he says, definitely. We believe that there is one God, but there are many ways of understanding and talking about God. And we may feel God when we act like our better selves, when we help someone, or are nice to someone, or love someone. Okay? The reason I put that one is because I often hear Reconstructionist Judaism doesn't believe in God. The last one I'm going to share is Jewish renewal. And Jewish renewal is kind of, well, I'm going to say renewal. And it combines a lot of meditative practice and such, and has taken, in the last 30 years, taken hold in our community. We pray to experience being addressed by God in the present. We worship in ways that honor both our tradition and intuition. We see the struggle of the human spirit and the divine as one evolving process that calls us to a partnership. So what's important here is that they seek to experience God. And that's for another discussion, but I wanted to share that difference with you because that's the only group that does exactly really mention that. So I said that being a true, unquestioning believer in traditional Jewish theology is not a membership requirement of our people. And by admission, and I don't know who polls these things, but it's a Pew study of the last 10 years, about 50% of people have doubt. To be honest with you, I think that that's really lower than I would think it would be, because interestingly enough, there was a head of a yeshiva in Jerusalem who was recently asked about belief in God, and he said, I'm 85% intellectually convinced. Even in Orthodoxy, there's room for a little uncertainty. And a lot of people struggle with this, and a lot of people feel guilty that they feel uncertain. I'm telling you that it's part of the human condition. There are people who is somebody raising their hand? I see a hand constantly. Judy, are you? I can't. Okay, sorry. I don't know if that's attention getting or an accident. Okay, we good? Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. I wanted to say that some people without any issue pray Baruch Atah Adoshem or Baruch Atah Adonai, and there are people who pray Baruch Atah I don't know. At any rate, Judaism teaches that the prayer part is for ourselves. Lahitpalel is a reflexive verb, so it goes back to us and suggests that God doesn't need these prayers and God doesn't need this praise. But maybe the real reason that the prayers enumerate God's attributes is to remind us of them and to instill those attributes in each one of us. I mentioned the difficulty in making something material that isn't material. And I had the privilege a long time ago, and this particular piece of paper I'm reading from is done with a typewriter to tell you how ancient it is. It's just one generation past cuneiform or something like that, written in stone. But this is Rabbi Harold Schulweis, very short. He says, this is a children's exercise. And he says, touch my nose, touch my ears, touch my eyes with your small hands. Touch them, then touch my arms and my chest. Feel their shape, how real they are. Now, touch my love. No, not my chest or arms. Touch my love. You're puzzled. How is one to touch love? And where is its place? Such things like love and God cannot be fingered, placed, or poked. And of such things, it's wiser to ask not where, but when. Not where is God, but when is God. My personal journey, I share with you for whatever it's worth, is that it took me years. Like any, I suspect, reasonably educated, thinking person of this world, particularly in my teens and my um, college years, I had my doubts. I had to work it through, even though I came from a traditional family and never really doubted observance of ritual, because I said to myself a long time ago that I'm not going to be the one that breaks the chain. The chain's been going to in forever, and I'm not going to be the one that breaks it. But from a theological in your head point of view, it's I have no guilt about feeling that I was struggling and trying to understand this God thing. Lots of doubt. And I was very turned off by the unequivocal acceptance of all powerful and all judging and all punishing guy in the sky. Really didn't like the idea of someone keeping score up there. Particularly Yom Kippur was troublesome to me, still is. Um, I've always felt that when it comes to myself, I have to keep my own score, that the work is left for me. But I have to tell you that I have evolved, and God is very much a part of my life. I'm not trying to sell you. I'm just trying to share. The process is human. The process is one that takes work, and for me, probably took 30 years, and a lot of study, and a lot of consideration, and a lot of ins and outs, and that kind of thing. But ultimately, my God, as I see God, is my creator, is a creator who pretty much now sits back and advises and motivates. He's an inspirational force for me and a source of energy, and it reminds me of what's happening and what's right, and sends me to do things in community, and sends me to places where I can awe and appreciate and be thankful and marvel, and sends me friends, and sends me now. I have to tell you, I was just thinking about this. I mentioned that so I have uh, today someone in the family had serious surgery, and I got a text, and my gut reaction right away was when found out the surgery was over and things went well, thank God and thank the doctors. And that I wrote that down. I thought, that's kind of me, because I am a balance. I guess I'm playing both ends against in terms of understanding. My belief is that God empowers the doctors, and I sent the right vibes that way. Right or wrong, I just wanted to share with you that that's what I'm working on and have come to at this point. So I am comfortable with God. For me, is a household word. And I understand some people do have a difficulty with that. The doubting part is very interesting. I had a communication with a young friend who is not Jewish about 3 months ago about how her community was beating up on her for asking questions, an evangelical community. I think that some of us feel, just from the cultures that we've lived in, that you somehow have to feel guilty as Jews for asking questions. And for sure, there are some communities and some environments where you don't want to have these conversations. I'm not asking you in any way to cause an explosion or to break a friendship or anything like that. But I'm also telling you that the idea of the struggle is nothing to be ashamed of or to be um, feel guilty about. In our particular uh, belief system, you have to do the work, and that's the being Jewish part. Don't dismiss it. Don't give up. Okay, that's Cheryl, and enough about that. I want to share with you people who are much wiser than me, and some of their wisdom. And one of them, and we're going to hear from 4 rabbis in very, very different things, and not too long, I promise you. One of them is Rabbi Bradley Artson, who I marginally know, spent some time with, and he's brilliant. And he's identifies currently with the conservative movement, and I don't know that that really matters in terms of this content, but I share that with you. And Brad Artson told me a long time ago, and I wrote it down because I thought it was worth remembering, that I grew up in a home where religion was a synonym for stupid. Then what happened was that he went to Harvard, and he went to the Hillel there, and a very revered rabbi at that time, whose name was Ben Sion Gold. I'm assuming that Brad is probably late 50s now, maybe. So however many years it was. So Rabbi Ben Zion Gold basically told him, come for 2 months and then you'll make a decision. Basically, in that time and with whatever else happened in that environment, Rabbi Artson came to love Judaism. And some of the things that he says, and he says frequently, I'd like to share with you. One of them is that he believes that the experience of God came after room was made for him in my life. Before that experience of those 2 months, I had no room for him in my life. But that doesn't mean that there's an unquestioning, unwavering belief. It's not possible for sensitive modern people not to have doubts, not to be an atheist at least once a day. A rational human being can't grapple with much of the messiness that there is in the world. On the other hand, someone who cannot at least once a day say how miraculous the world is also stunted. You have to be able to say, this is so magnificent. There has to be someone to thank. We can't take in or comprehend totally what God is. He uses the story of 3 blind people who are put in a room with an elephant and are asked by touch to figure out what it is. Ultimately, all 3 of them do figure out that it's an elephant from what they've heard about elephants, but they describe that elephant differently. It's still an elephant, but each one is a different kind of elephant. They're unable to grasp the totality of it because of their limitations. That's the analogy that he's using for our human ability to comprehend. We may have mutually incompatible views about God, but that might be the only reasonable way to think about God. Here's a word. The word is theodicy. Theodicy. And what it means is evil in the world, an explanation or for the bad in the world. If God is good and God is loving, how does such bad stuff happen? The truth is that there's a balance in our lives, but we have a tendency as humans to kind of gloss over the everyday miracles and only notice the bad stuff. The bad outcomes make us angry, and the good outcomes, hopefully, many times we are appreciative and thankful, but the reality is frequently the good outcomes, that's the way it's supposed to be. I'm going to move on to the next thing. Going back to Rabbi Artson. When my beautiful son, Jacob, was diagnosed with autism as a child some 14 years ago at the age of 3, I stopped putting on my talit and tefillin. I'd been taught that God was all powerful, which would mean God could have prevented Jacob's autism, but didn't. I couldn't pray to someone who could inflict autism. I said to God, it's better that we don't talk for a while. I'm a good person. How could he do this to me? I keep kosher. I don't mix linen and wool in my clothing. I help people all day long. I'm fighting for the survival of the Jewish people. How could God let this happen to my beautiful, innocent son? Rabbi Harold Kushner, who's the author of that very famous book, When Bad Things Happen to Good People, says that expecting the universe to make exceptions for you because you are a good person is like expecting a bull not to charge because you're a vegetarian. During my decade of reckoning with God and coming to terms with Jacob's autism, I began to develop a different relationship with God and a different understanding of God's relationship to our world. God is not a substance or a thing, but rather a distinctive energy. It is God who provides the grounds for our creativity, our becoming more connected, just, compassionate. It's God working through Jacob that allows Jacob to triumph over his autism day by day. Instead of looking to God as an all-powerful bully, I started looking to God as a very example of the rules, the one who makes it possible for us to surpass ourselves. I don't think God gave my son autism or could have stopped it. I don't believe that God interferes with nature. I don't believe that God caused the Holocaust or could have prevented it. God is the resilient force, luring us, commanding us to rise to the best choices. In that sense, God is like the GPS system in my wife's car. I call it GLINUS. When we drive, GLINUS routinely shows that it understands God better than I do. GLINUS and I will both say to my wife, the driver, when you get to the stop sign, take a left. And then Alana, for reasons neither GLINUS nor I comprehend, will drive to the stop sign and keep going straight. This is where GLINUS and I part ways, because I want to blurt out, what are you doing? I told you you were supposed to. You're going to miss the exit. But GLINUS simply says, recalibrating. Then it offers a corrective next choice. At the next corner, take a right, and then a right, and then a right. GLINUS remains calm, unruffled. I know that God is like the GPS in that way. God doesn't judge or condemn us. God doesn't coerce us. He offers us the best possible choice. If we rise to God's lure, then God says, good. If we don't accept the lure, God says, recalibrating, okay, given your last choice, here's the best possible choice that you can now make. There's an old rabbinic tale about the wind and the sun arguing who is stronger. The wind says, I'll show you that I'm stronger. I'm going to get those people to remove their jackets. But the more the wind blew to force those jackets off, the more people clutched their jackets tightly. The sun said, you're trying the wrong kind of strength. Watch. And the sun simply radiated light. And the sun's beams beckoned, and the people loosened up their jackets. Eventually, the sun's light was so beautiful and so intoxicating that they chose to take their jackets off. A God of invitational power and beauty is actually God, the God we believe in, the one that possesses, the one that allows us to see the unvarnished beauty of Torah. We have the science and philosophy to be able to embrace what we know and to live with what we know. We now have, the science and the philosophy to live with what we know. I don't believe the bully in the sky. I would rather celebrate the cosmic companion. So that's kind of heavy, but his words to me are more impactful than I could ever give you. Basically, what he's saying is that God is not a noun at all, that God is a verb. God is a process. It's not that there is a God, because there is a God, we believe, but it's where is God. That's a little bit different from the Rabbi Schulweis poem, but it's the same concept. Where do you find God? Wherever you leave him in. When is God? Whenever you leave him in. Again, very, very different because it's surrounding and it's everywhere and it's a force than the guy in the sky, vertical, sort of childlike image. I'm going to stop here for a little bit of a breather. Does anybody want to unmute and comment?
Cheryl?
Yes, please, Rita.
Yes, I told you once that I don't like the word God.
Right, I didn't understand that. Explain, please. Help me.
I don't like the word because we use it in so many, the word I'm thinking of is mundane, in so many silly ways. You know, we'll say God this, God that, and it just doesn't encompass my emotional feelings and my connections. So I don't like to use the word because I think my concept is too large. I see good and bad. I know we have choices, and the word is too confined. It's too confining for me. I don't know if it makes sense, but
It totally made. I think that's. I was trying. Maybe you're saying it better than I did, which is basically we're limited by our language. We really
yeah,
have.
yes. And that's so it limits our interpretation and our belief system as well. And I just don't feel, I don't want the confinement of that word.
Do you have a suggestion? So what do you do?
I I've never had I know perhaps I've had my back and forth, but I never had my disbelief. I always knew, or I always felt that there was a force larger than I. And I love the story. I'm sure I've said it before. I love the story my mother said when I was about 4 or 5 years old. And I asked her, what are all the lights going on and all this? It was Christmas time. And my mother said, it's the celebration of a Jewish baby.
Uh-huh.
And I loved that story because it encompassed my feeling of universal belief system. And so, as I said, the word just is too confining. And I've looked at, because of so many things that have happened in my life, I've looked at our belief as encompassing and just there. Just, it wasn't a question for me. It was part of me.
I thank you, and I suspect that you articulate what many people feel, and I also have to respect that there are people with different experiences and different feelings, and I hope to address a few things that might be on their mind yet. But what you say makes a lot of sense, and the idea that the struggle, and when you said you have your ins and outs, that's a great way of being Jewish. Absolutely a part of what we're supposed to do. You without the power in California, yes.
So my grandson is here from Cleveland. And I said, I'm getting on
Okay, we can't hear you, Jackie. Jackie, you're cutting out.
a class with Cheryl, and he says, oh, yeah. She,
Okay.
I
Jackie.
for Cheryl.
Okay, thank
Why?
you. Jackie,
Oh,
we can't hear you.
oh.
You're
Can
cutting
you hear
out.
me now?
So maybe you just want to
A
chat.
little?
Okay, maybe you just want to chat it. All right. Forgive me, but
You can't hear me?
you're cutting in and out.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, but you're in and out. So
Okay.
I'm gonna forgive me, but it's not clear. We have some power issues a little bit on that thing. So let's go. I don't want to brush over this theodicy thing just because of what Rabbi Artson said, but it was an example. I essentially there is, and we're gonna hit it a little bit more. I'm gonna talk to you a little bit about Rabbi Jonathan Sachs and some others on this, but the idea that people are the question that's been on many people's minds and is, how could God have allowed the Holocaust to happen? Or do really people get punished for their sins? If they do something bad, is that can, to the third generation, those kinds of things. I mentioned, and I think it's important to mention again, that the concept of God has to be different for modern man in terms of our experience, or modern woman for that matter, than for when the concept was first articulated. And an evolving concept. The idea of scientists having a conflict with God is, for some people, they take it for granted. And I can tell you from absolute personal experience, because science is like an everyday word in our family, is that people do not find the conflict in that kind of thing. But the one thing that does is this idea of this punishment thing. And frequently we look towards religion, especially in times when we had very little understanding of free will or of how nature works, as we look for explanations of how did it happen. And it was very consistent with earlier civilizations that there was some powerful god or gods that you had to appease in some way, perhaps by an offering or a sacrifice or whatever, 20 virgins or whatever it took. and that way you wouldn't get the punishment. So this idea of a punishing God kind of seeped in and was for a long time and still is, in particularly the Yom Kippur liturgy, there. On the other hand, as rational human beings, and specifically the Holocaust question, some people have said God died in the Holocaust. That's understood. But when you ask the most sincerely believing people about how did the Holocaust happen, the belief system in modern Judaism is God did not cause the Holocaust, man caused the Holocaust. Free will is the way that man controls the world, is a partner with God and has a place and a role. It's not left up to the gods and your service to him or her or them. Um, Understand that people who believe that God brings the thunder, I would believe, this is me, that God created the thunder as a concept, but doesn't bring the thunder. That is a question that comes because that's how natural forces work. There is a midrash about someone stealing seeds. If God interfered with nature, those seeds would never grow once they're planted because it was a sin and there would be a punishment due because they were stolen. But the fact is they do grow. God doesn't interfere, with nature, those kinds of ideas. So that kind of idea in terms of reward and punishment is certainly out there, and there are certainly communities in Judaism that still believe in that strongly. But one of my teachers shared with that you saw in Judaism through the medieval times the concept of demons and you being demons living within you, and everything, any kind of sickness you had was caused by demons. Today we redefine demons as bacteria and viruses, unfortunately. But the idea of needing an explanation kind of helps us understand why bad things happen to good people. But this idea that they deserved it is not a mainstream or even 90% Jewish concept. It's still troublesome that horrible things happen, but the Jewish response now is how do we make it stop? We have to go
Cheryl,
farther in making it stop. Yes.
Cheryl, we've all had people who have done things to us that we wish hadn't, or we've not been able to, whether it's family or whatever. And my Bubba used to say, the dancer pays the fiddler. And
Please repeat that. I'm sorry, I missed it. The dancers, what?
the dancer pays the fiddler.
Oh, the fiddler. Okay.
And so in my mind, in order, if there were things I didn't have control of, there were things that were happening with people around me, it gave me comfort to think that he was going to be judged by Hashem. Not by me, but I let it go that way because the dancer pays the fiddler. If you're gonna dance, you gotta pay. And if you're not gonna do right, if you're not gonna be ethical, if you're not gonna do those things, I'm not gonna be the judge of you, but there is a higher authority like the hot dog, thing.
That is a very, very prominent, what I call on the acceptable Jewish beliefs. That is definitely up there. Absolutely. Absolutely. But that kind of is talking about reward and punishment at a level that's related to, but not exactly what I'm talking about, the innocent suffering when we talk about Rabbi Artson's son, or if I don't know if you remember Rabbi Kushner's child who died of progeria. When you age, when you become, I think he died, I don't know, as a teenager, as with the body of a 106-year-old person, that kind of horror. So those kinds of things do happen. But and the idea of, let's talk a little bit about science now, because I'm watching the clock go by, and this is also an important topic. There's actually no tension in Judaism between science and religion, and I'll share with you a little more on that in a few seconds. But essentially, Judaism believes that the science is the how, and that religion is the why. The science is the how, and the religion is the why. And the things that might be tense, for example, the idea of creationism being a tension and evolution in Christianity, has a lot to do with the way the Bible is read in Christian circles, which is pshat. I remember I taught you a long time ago, there are 4 levels of reading. The most literal, which is just the words, and then you have to extract at least a metaphor or a symbolism and then a lesson from it. Not, reading it just on Peshat is not the literal way. So what does that mean? And what is the relevance and what is the application? So when you talk about uh, creation, there's creation in the Bible, but I'm going to save it for a few moments for Rabbi Sachs is going to tell you. I'm sort of building up the mystery right now. But I mentioned, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about mystical, which is something I'm very unknowledgeable about. I can probably know 2 pages worth of stuff on mysticism, maybe 3. But in Jewish mysticism, thousands of years ago, the concept is that the world had a tzum, that God contracted part of the world, created, world is the wrong word, because actually the word olam, world, is the same word. Time and space are synonymous in Judaism. If you want to, if that isn't a mind-boggling idea, it really is, but for another class. But having said that, this tzimtzum contraction of stuff that God had in mystical belief, Kabbalistic belief, in order to create the world, caused a crack, a big crash. And then we have in science something called the Big Bang. And it's just really interesting that there's a different concept for a similar kind of thing. And you can find these kinds of patterns with religion. They're not the same, but there's some sort of awareness of things happening, but from a totally different perspective. One of the things that religious scientists say keeps them believers is that there's no randomness in the world. When you really know science, the mystery of the order and the plan and the detail, it can't be random. It couldn't just be an accident. It couldn't happen. I'm not telling you to believe that, but I'm telling you to respect and consider that people who know frequently say that thing. There's an awe in this order. Einstein, who people love to quote, was very vague on religion, and he was pretty non-committal. You could quote, if you're an atheist, sentences from Einstein which would say he's confirming atheism. And if you are a theist, meaning a believer in God, you could absolutely find an abundance of quotes from Einstein suggesting that he believes that there is a God. But the one thing that is consistent with him is that was not inconsistent, is that he always said there is the concept of God is definitely possible. He did not dismiss it. So he was probably in that agnostic kind of situation for his entire life. So at any rate, I want to mention one other thing. I mentioned the word atheist, and it just reminded me of a little thing that I would like to share with you, which is there's a Hasidic piece of advice that says, if someone reaches out to you for help, in that moment, become an atheist. Imagine that there's no God who can help, and you say, I will help. If someone reaches out to you for help, imagine in that moment that you are an atheist and that there is no God, and you say, I will help. This is from Rabbi Jeffrey Middleman. Can a religious person believe in science? Of course. While some people think of science and religion as being inherently in conflict, I think it's because they tend to define religion as blind acceptance and complete certainty about silly, superstitious fantasies and literal Torah. Quite honestly, if that's what religion was, I wouldn't be religious. In fact, that's not religion. It's not religion in general that particular definition of, excuse me, let me start that again. It's not religion in general, but that particular definition of religion that is so often in conflict with science. Instead, my experience with Judaism has been that it embraces science quite easily. So why is that? Some religions claim that they know God's will, but for us, there's a great Yiddish expression that says, if I knew God, I'd be God. In fact, claiming in fact, there are a whole range of different theologies within Judaism. Indeed, my own theology, I believe that God is found in becoming and transforming what will be into what is. Science, too, is very much about process. Science at its best is about testing hypotheses, setting up experiments, and exploring ideas. It's dynamic and ever changing, just like our experience of God. And perhaps that's how science and religion can be reconciled, not as two realms that are in conflict, but as two things that you do. Somebody please silence themselves, mute. Science is about creating hypotheses and testing data. Judaism is about how we act to improve the world here and now. And these processes can easily go hand in hand. As I mentioned, the science is kind of the how, and the religion is the why. Okay. Last thing. Rabbi Sachs, who was one of the most brilliant minds of this generation in terms of modern orthodoxy, and I would say outreach throughout all of Judaism and throughout all of, basically in terms of multi-faith respect from people throughout the world. He passed away last month. His shloshim, his 30 days ended the day before yesterday. And to Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, if you don't know, was the chief rabbi of the British Commonwealth for 23 years and many other incredible titles and incredible works, and a light to many nations. In case you can't tell, I really love Rabbi Sachs. So he, in a book that he wrote not terribly long ago, he discusses science and religion and the pitfalls of hardline atheism. He mixes these particular things together. And he talks about hardline atheism. For our purposes, we're going to just say atheism. He's putting it in the absolute judgmental of anybody who isn't an atheist as being, as Rabbi Artson said in that first piece that I read you, stupid. You either are an atheist or you are stupid, okay? That there are people who are in the questioning or on the struggle side, they're totally acceptable, even encouraged to keep that struggle going on. But he's talking here about how he defines hardline atheist. His argument is not that science and religion are perfectly compatible. Instead, he suggests that no single system of knowledge engages the world completely. There was a time when the church felt that it could censure truths that it felt to be inconsistent with its own deeply held beliefs. But now it's as if it were almost a mirror image. Science is claiming the monopoly of knowledge, and thus scientific atheists are intent on depriving religions of any merit. Science takes things apart to see how they work. Religion puts them together to see what they mean. And I think that people who spend their lives taking things apart to see how they work sometimes find it difficult to understand the people who put things together to see what they mean. Why do so few Jews take issue with the theory of evolution, while creationism is common among Christians, meaning the belief in the Creator creating the world, and that teaching evolution is akin to teaching profanity? It is heresy. I think Christians tend to think that religion and science were part of the same universe. So they assumed that the Bible was telling us scientific stuff as well as moral and spiritual stuff. Whereas Jews don't read the Bible that way. I mean, look at how many times look at how much time the Bible spends in describing creation. 34 verses. Genesis 1 is not remotely thinking about science. It's clear in the first chapter of the Bible that it is teaching us about the goodness of the world, not about the cosmogenesis of the world. You remember, and it says, and it was good, and God said it was good 7 times. That's so what the message is, not a science text. Differently by Christians. Judaism embodies a truth that we may have forgotten for a while. There's nothing in Judaism that's hostile to science. I think we're great admirers of it, and the Talmud has here and there little notes of real admiration for the Greeks and for their ability to think scientifically, and also has some scorn for the Greeks' lack of ability to consider abstractions. In the past few years, there's been a tendency to compare these atheists that we talked about before to certain fundamentalist religious groups. A fundamentalist is someone who can't really understand a point of view opposite to their own. He can't hear in stereo. He can't see in 3D. Okay? The new atheists tend either to lack a sense of humor, or the only humor they're capable of is sarcasm. I mean, somebody with a little intellectual humility does not say, anyone who disagrees with me is stupid. That is fundamentalism. Fundamentalism is the attempt to impose a single truth on our plural world. Comments, questions, reactions?
Cheryl?
Yes,
Leslie.
Leslie, I see you.
I've come over the past couple of years to settle on my definition of God, so to speak, and my reconciliation of that with science. But the one thing that gives me a little trouble with it is the creation of something. In my embracing of my own acceptance is that what is always was. And I don't know if there's anything in Judaism that would say 2 things. Number one, you shouldn't settle on a definition. It should always be evolving. I don't know if there is something from what you've said.
I'd say that's a pretty strong argument. What else? Yeah.
But the second thing is this idea of the creation of the first little molecule. That has been something that doesn't quite set well with my own definitions, except to say it always was in some parallel universe or something or another. Is there anything in Judaism that would address that particular controversy?
First of all, you're honoring me by thinking that I have the answer to such a profound question, Leslie, and I really mean that. The answer is that that's the unknowable. You know, the Judaism, what is in Judaism is that there are things that are unknowable. And I would ask you, I don't know how to say this, that I don't want it's going to imply the wrong thing because I don't mean it. First of all, I admire you, I know you, and your struggle is absolutely so Jewish and so magnificent, and that's great. You have never been dismissive of this idea, and you're doing the work like I was talking about. But the idea that we have to have an answer is, I guess, part of what is I'm saying you have to let go of. I wrote in my notes here, and I don't think I said it, that what helps me is to just let go of the need to articulate. It just is, and I don't know that affects any differences. There's some things we'll never know. And it doesn't.
That's what I say to myself. I say to myself, it just is.
I think, yeah. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. We will never know. And I don't know how it would change our lives or the value of our lives to know that. You know, my first
Thank you,
thought was,
Cheryl.
let me give you a phone number of a molecular biologist, but that might be a
That's
different
about right.
discussion. And that might be it. I have to see what he would say about that before I give you his phone
Right.
number. But I think I know. I mean, he's the guy with the randomness. It can't be random. It can't be random. Anyway, it's great, and thank you. But I don't know, except that you don't need to know. You need to respect that it could. You know, I'm gonna let that go. I don't have the words.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay, how can I?
Cheryl, it's Amy.
Hi, Amy. I'll be with you in 1 second. This question is, all right, let me take your question and then I'm going to take this other question. Okay, please go ahead, Amy.
In my evolution and struggle, I guess to try to articulate that I came to the conclusion that I'm much more comfortable. I'm not comfortable with the biblical God. I'm more comfortable with the rabbinic God.
Mhm.
And my effort to come to grips with that, I came to my theory is that God gave the Jews the God they needed at the time. Like a child, a parent and a child, you don't have a conversation with the 2-year-old. The beginning of Judaism, he was dealing with a people who were not used to the concept of a God in the universe. So that he formulated his image that he presented to us using the he in a certain way. And it is up to us to acknowledge, as others have said, this evolutionary, this dynamicity of God, that God is a verb and not a static noun. So that's theory of Judaism, Jews being an infant through our bar mitzvah, that we grow, and God presented himself in a way that would help us.
I absolutely, and it's essentially this. We could not, if we were the same religion we were 300 years ago, we would not be in existence because we are not the same people. And the idea that we are thinking people is very much in Judaism, the acceptance of that. The robotic mindset, and I have to be careful what I'm saying, I'm being recorded. There are religions that really do not accept any variation from the one idea that's on the table. And you are a sinner if you don't believe it. We do not have that particular. There's some things that are absolutely off the table, like Jews are not very big on murder or adultery. You know, that's kind of off the table. But there's so many things that have variety and nuance. And the evolution, we have to recognize that's fine, and understanding that you can't be judgmental of somebody who doesn't have the same one.
And that in his wisdom, God gave us the God that we needed to help us grow and become familiar.
I see your hand, Les. Thank you so
May I,
much.
may I
Amy.
just add one?
Okay, I'm sorry. I have 2 questions waiting here. Do you have a quickie? You have
Yeah,
a quickie?
do I?
Okay.
Yes. So many times as I listen to you, I see a relevance to the Constitution of the United States.
Yes, right.
It's something that we interpret, and we have the fundamentalist interpretation, the originalist, the this, the that, the other. And again, from what Amy was saying, that brought that back to mind as well. It helps me to compare to the Constitution.
Just remember which one came first, Leslie, but I have to tell you, I quoted you yesterday to my husband, the lawyer, on exactly that topic.
What?
Exactly. You're sure that I did before. So, I mean, we're not the only ones who have made that discussion.
Sure.
There's a question here about having trouble with the nouns that you pick the male side, Avinu Malkeinu and Abba, and all these words. If you look at more modern prayer books, and the person who wrote this probably has not been exposed to some of the more liberal translations or editions of at least in English. or the addition of, we've added the imahot, the excuse me, the matriarchs to this particular thing. But we absolutely, when the Bible was originally written, this was a patriarchal society, and God, and that language absolutely reverberates, and it's here in the Hebrew. Please understand that we also have in Judaism, there is a feminine side. I referenced it at the Earth class on spirituality. There's a feminine side, the Shekhinah. God is not male in Judaism, never was. There are qualities that grammatically are male, and there are qualities that are grammatically female. But that is, again, a human thing and basically a linguistic thing from a language, or that we have limits on in English. We don't have a neutral. When we're talking about other languages, whether it be Spanish or French or Hebrew, we have feminine and masculine gender in language, but the concept really hasn't carried through until modern times, when we have added the matriarchs to the prayer book, and we have in some non-gender changing words to people and they, and some translations into English of prayer books, but you kind of have to seek them out or have them pointed out to you. So I mean, how you get past it is you make up the decision, you make up your mind to get past it. Because you have to, ultimately, what I had said before is tefillah for Jews is for yourself, and it has to speak to you, and you have to read the words that they speak to you and mean what they mean to you. I want to tell you something that I forgot to mention before when I mentioned the Avot and Imachot, when God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. Okay, we don't say God of, and just like I did all those names, we say God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob. All of those 7 people had different gods. That's why we say it that way. In their mind, they needed to make the connection in a way that was relevant and meaningful to them. That's to me a critical message in understanding the fundamental core belief of our ability within the set of accepted rules, so to speak, to have a relationship with God that works for us. Okay. I'm sorry, I have a question here. What was God's plan? Okay. Yes. Why are we here? I would say that most people now would say that we are basically the actors of God. I don't mean actors like theater actors. I mean, we are the actors. We are partners with God. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel wrote a book called In Partnership with God, and another one called God in Search of Man, meaning God couldn't make the world what she intended it to be without the use of woman. I'm changing the pronouns now, or nouns now. But so we are made in the image of God. Maybe we are God now, or the actors of God, or the only way that God can be in the world today is through us. And it ain't easy, right? We know that. But I just want to leave with a few quickies here of some things. A Hasidic saying: whenever someone asks, "Where is God?" tell them, "Wherever you let her in." Okay. I'm going to ask you to think about where you feel God. When the sun comes up, when friends laugh together, when someone holds a door open for you when you're carrying heavy packages, when you find the perfect recipe and you feel like you realize that you got everything in the house that you need to actually make it. Okay. These are times when you can let God in. You need to let God in. We feel the richer for it. Rabbi Sig Schwartz teaches there's good religion and there's bad religion. And bad religion places doctrine over people. Good religion places people over doctrine. I feel with all my heart that we are part of that religion. And to keep that in mind with a source of pride, whatever our struggle is or whatever our belief system is, we have the opportunities to be partners and to make a change and to be godly. So, as I say, this is a super tough topic. It's challenging. I hope that I at least gave you a few concepts, a few ideas to think about and to validate that your struggles are healthy. And if you don't have struggles, yasher koach to you. Just go out there and do good. And if you're in Cleveland, please put on boots and a coat, okay? And I hope that I will see you. We're scheduled for sometime in early January, but we do have Rabbi Goldstein later in the month. And hopefully I will see you on that call. Is there any final closing words? We have 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
Amazing teaching, like always, Cheryl. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a good class.
Very good. Very good.
That's hard.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't need thank you. But anyways, great seeing you. Blanquita, we have to talk.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Be well. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.